Hi everyone, it's Miss Brenner. We're going to continue reading As Good as New by Charlie Jane Anders. We are at the top of page 11. Alright, let's see. We are at Marisol and Richard sat and watched the facts of life together. Richard kept complaining and saying things like, "This is worse than being trapped inside a bottle." But he also seemed to enjoy complaining about it. "This show kept me marginally sane when I was the only person on Earth," Marisol said. "I still can't wrap my head around what happened to the human race." "So, you are conscious of the passage of time when you're inside the bottle?" She was very careful to avoid phrasing anything as a question. "It's very strange," Richard said. "When I'm in the bottle, it's like I'm in a sensory deprivation tank, except not particularly warm. I float with no sense of who or where I am, but meanwhile another part of me is getting flashes of awareness of the world. But I can't control them. I might be hyper-aware of one ant carrying a single crumb up a stem of grass for an eternity, or I might just have a vague sense of clouds over the ocean, or some old woman's aches and pains. It's like hyper-lucid dreaming, sort of." "Shh," said Marisol. "This is the good part. Joe's about to lay some Brooklyn wisdom on these spoiled rich girls." The episode ended, and another episode started right away. "You take the good, you take the bad," Richard groaned loudly. "So what's your plan, if I may ask? You're just going to sit here and watch television for another few years?" he snorted. "I have no reason to hurry," Marisol said. "I can spend a decade coming up with the perfect wishes. I have tons of frozen dinners." At last she took pity on Richard and found a stash of PBS American Playhouse episodes on the media server, plus other random theater stuff. Richard really liked Carl Churchill, but didn't care for Alan Ackelborn. He hated Wendy Weatherstan. Eventually, she put him back in the bottle again. Marisol started writing down possible draft wishes in one of the 3 blank journals that she'd found in a drawer. Burton had probably expected to record his thoughts, if any, for posterity. And then she started writing a brand new play instead. The first time she'd even tried in a few years. Her play was about a man, her protagonist always seemed to be men, who moves to the big city to become a librarian, and winds up working for a strange old lady tending her collection of dried-out leaves from every kind of tree in the world. Pedro is so shy he can't even speak to more than 2 people, but so beautiful that everybody wants him to be a fashion model. He pays an optometrist to put drops in his eyes so he won't see the people photographing and lighting him as he models. She had no clue how this play was going to end, but she felt a responsibility to finish it. That's what Mrs. Garrett would expect. She was still stung by the idea that her prize-winning play was dumb, or worse yet, kind of misogynistic. She wished she had an actual copy of the play, so she could show it to Richard, and he would realize her true genius. But she didn't wish that out loud, of course. And maybe this was the kick. She needed to write a better play, a play that made sense of some of this mess. She'd figured it out. She told Richard the next time she opened his bottle, "I've figured out what happened those other times. Someone finds your bottle after the apocalypse, and they get 3 wishes. So the first wish is to bring the world back and reverse the destruction. The second wish is to make sure it doesn't happen again. But then they still have 1 wish left, and that's the one where they do something stupid and selfish, like wishing for irresistible sex appeal." "Or perfect hair," said Richard Wolfe, doing his patented eye roll and air swat. "Or unlimited wealth, or fame, or everlasting youth and beauty, or the perfect lasagna recipe." "They probably figured they deserved it." Marisol stared at the pages of scribbling in her hands. One set of diagrams mapped out her new, as yet unnamed play. A second set of diagrams trying to plan out the wish-making process act by act. Her own scent clung to every surface in the panic room. The recirculated and purified air smelled like the inside of her own mouth. "I mean, they saved the world, right? So they've earned fame, or parties, except I bet that's where it all goes wrong." "That's an interesting theory," said Wolfe, arms folded and head tilted to one side, like he was physically restraining himself from expressing an opinion. Marisol threw out almost every part of her new play, except the part about her main character needing to be temporarily vision impaired so he can model. That part seemed to speak to her. Once she cleared away the clutter about the old woman and the leaves and the stuff, Pedro stands in a room full of people doing makeup and lighting and photography and catering, and they're all blurred to him. And he falls in love with one woman, but he only knows her voice, not her face, and he's afraid to ruin it by learning her name or seeing what she looks like. By now Marisol had confused the two processes in her mind. She kept thinking that she would know what to wish for as soon as she finished writing the play. She labored over the first scene for a week before she had the nerve to show it to Richard, and he kept narrowing his eyes and breathing loudly through his nose as he read it. But then he said it was actually a promising start, actually not terrible at all. The mystery woman phones Pedro up, and he recognizes her voice instantly. So now he has her phone number, and he agonizes about calling her. What's he afraid of anyway? He decided his biggest fear is that he'll go out on a date with the woman, and people will stare at the two of them. If the woman is beautiful as Pedro, they'll stare because it's two beautiful people together. If she's plain looking, they'll stare because they'll wonder what he sees in her. When Pedro eats out alone, he has a way of shrinking in on himself, so nobody notices him, but he can't do that on a date. At last, Pedro calls her, and they talk for an hour. On stage, she is partially hidden from the audience, so they, too, can't see what the woman looks like. It's a theme in your work, Richard Wolff sniffed. The hidden person, the flirting through a veil, the self-loathing narcissistic love affair. I guess so, Marisol said. I'm interested in people who are seen and people who see, and the female gaze and whatever. She finished the play, and then it occurred to her that if she made a wish that none of this stuff had happened, her new play could be unwritten as a result. When the time came to make her wishes, she rolled up the notebook and tucked it into her waistband of her sweatpants, hoping against hope that anything on her immediate person would be preserved when the world was rewritten. In the end, Pedro agrees to meet the woman, Susanna, for a drink, but he gets some of the eye-dilated drops from the optometrist friend. He can't decide whether to put the drops in his eyes before the date. He's in the men's room at the bar where they're meeting, and the bottle in his hand, and he's dithering, and then someone disturbs him, and he accidentally drops the bottle in the toilet. And Susanna turns out to be pretty, not like a model, but more distinctive. And she has a memorable face, full of life. She laughs a lot. Pedro stops feeling shy around her, and Pedro discovers that if he looks into Susanna's eyes when he's doing his modeling, he no longer needs the eye drops to shut out the rest of the world. It's a corny ending, Marisol admits, but I like it. Richard Wolff shrugged. Anything is better than unearned ambivalence. Marisol decided that was a good review coming from him. Here's what Marisol wished. I wish this apocalypse and all previous apocalypses had never happened, and that all previous wishes related to the apocalypse had never been wished. I wish that there was a slight alteration to the laws of probability as related to apocalyptic scenarios, so that if, for example, an event threatening the survival of the human race has a 10% chance of happening, that 10% chance just never comes up, and yet this does not change anything else in the material world. I wish that I and my destined heirs will keep possession of this bottle, and will receive ample warning before any apocalyptic scenario comes up, so that we will have a chance to make the final wish. She had all three wishes written neatly on a sheet of paper, torn out of the notebook, and Richard Wolff scrutinized it a couple times, scratching his ear. That's it? He said at last. You do realize that I can make anything real, right? You can create a world of giant snails and tiny people. You can make The Facts of Life the most popular TV show in the world for the next 1,000 years, which would, incidentally, ensure the survival of the human race, since there would have to be somebody to keep watching The Facts of Life. You could do anything. Marisol shook her head. The only way to make sure we don't end up back here again is to keep it simple. And then, before she lost her nerve, she picked up the sheet of paper where she'd written down her 3 wishes, and she read them aloud. Everything went cheaply glittery around Marisol, and the panic room reshaped into the infinite ristretto. a trendy cafe that just happened to be roughly the same size and shape as the Panic Room. The blue leather walls turned to brown brick, with brass fixtures and posters of the legendary productions of Mamet Oline and Marcia Norman's Night Mother. All around Marisol, friends whose names she'd forgotten were hunched over their laptops, publicly toiling over their confrontational one-woman shows and chamber pieces. Her best friend Julie was in the middle of yelling at her, freckles almost washed out by her reddening face. "Forget doctors," Julie was shouting, loud enough to disrupt the whole room. "Theater is a direct intervention. It's like a cultural ambulance. Actors are like paramedics. Playwrights are like surgeons." Marisol was still wearing Burton's stained business shirt and sweatpants, but somehow she'd gotten a pair of flip-flops. The green bottle sat on the rickety white table nearby. Queen was playing on the stereo, and the scent of overpriced coffee was like the armpit of God. Julia's harangue choked off in the middle. There was a typo in my copy. Because Marisol was giving her the biggest stage hug in the universe, crying into Julia's green, streaked hair, and thanking all her stars that they were here together. By now, everyone was staring at them, but Marisol didn't care. Something fluttery and heavy fell out of the waistband of her sweatpants. A notebook. "I have something amazing to tell you, Jules," Marisol breathed into Julie's ear. She wanted to ask if Obama was still president, and if the Cold War was still over, and stuff, but she would find out soon enough, and this was more important. "Jules, I wrote a new play. It's all done, and it's going to change everything." Hyperbole was how Marisol and Julie and all their friends communicated. "Do you want to read it?" "Are you serious?" Julie pulled away, then saw the notebook on the floor between their feet. Curiosity took over, and she picked it up and started to read. Marisol borrowed $5 and got herself a pour-over, while Julie sat, knees in her face, reading the play. Every few minutes, Julia glanced up and said, "Well, okay," in a grudging tone, as if Marisol might not be past saving after all. And that is the end of As Good as New by Charlie Jane Anders. Alrighty, guys. I will talk to you later. Bye.